All right, welcome to Ep.5 of For the Love of the Game interview series. This is your host, Pete Janney. This is an interview series that brings on athletes, coaches, and other professionals in the sports industry. Here for Ep.5, a very special guest, Eric Krakauer. He is a native of Portugal, currently a play-by-play announcer for MLS Season Pass on Apple TV, and he currently serves as a club ambassador as well. He has previous experience calling games from the beIN Sports headquarters in Miami, doing games on La Liga, Liga One, and the Champions League. And he has also provided coverage in the past on the New York Red Bulls and New York City FC as well during his time in New York. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to have you on. Obviously a lot of change going on in Major League Soccer right now. The growth that this league has had. You're currently find yourself down in Charlotte, and I kind of the way you got on my radar is because you're a Manhattan College guy, just like myself, and I really found your path very interesting, which we'll get into obviously on the show today. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get a sense of your experiences down in Charlotte so far. You're obviously calling games all around the league for Apple TV. But you've done some work with Charlotte FC as well as a club ambassador. So how is it like living down in Charlotte? And, could you talk about the growth of Charlotte FC since they started?
Yeah, it's been great. Look, if you told me, 10, 15 years ago that I would be buying a home in Charlotte, I wouldn't have believed you because I'd never been here before. When I moved from Europe, from Portugal specifically, spent some time in England, I moved to New York City, and I expected to live in New York for, most of my adult life and then return to Portugal, return to Europe. But instead, I found myself moving to Miami and then from Miami to Charlotte because Charlotte FC was ramping up for their inaugural season in Major League Soccer. I was sort of keeping an eye on what they were doing from Miami when I was with beIN Sports because I always wanted to work my way back into MLS because I believe strongly that the future of soccer in this country and its growth is dependent on the success of Major League Soccer for a variety of reasons, which I don't think your show is long enough to cover. I'm sure we'll touch on a few of them. And I was very fortunate that during the search for a play-by-play announcer, Charlotte's search for a play-by-play announcer, they found me and they decided to bring me on. So moved to Charlotte, and it was an incredible experience to commentate on their games in their maiden campaign. This city was ready for a soccer team, and they've shown that in the numbers that they show up with at Bank of America Stadium, averaging 35,000 a game. So it's been an incredible experience. I'm very fortunate to be here and fortunate to still be involved with the club as an ambassador.
Right. So obviously, Charlotte has been added to the list of many teams that have joined the league, as well as Nashville. St. Louis now is also in the fold. They've been doing great so far. Could you talk about these expansion and teams and what, in your opinion, what makes a great expansion city?
Well, I think Major League Soccer was diligent in picking cities that have shown to have an enormous interest in soccer. And I think that when a team or when a city or a club is trying to get into MLS, they have to prove that they have the right infrastructure, that their project is one that is ambitious, and that they have the potential for a huge following. And all those cities that you mentioned, I talked about Charlotte. You mentioned Nashville. They built the new stadium, Jodas Park. They were playing at Nissan Stadium before that, and they got excellent crowds. Now they have a soccer-specific stadium, and getting tickets to a game is very, very difficult. You mentioned St. Louis City. I was actually very fortunate to call a game there, the game where they went on to beat or achieve an expansion team record for wins to start a season And that place was absolutely raucous. Another unbelievable stadium, soccer specific. So to answer your question, I think that Major League Soccer just wants proof that whoever is trying to get into the league has, all the ingredients for success. And we've seen that over and over again. There's going to be a team in San Diego now, the 30th, and they've obviously proven that they can do the same. They have the San Diego Wave there, the women's team in the NWSL, who are doing really, really well. So the league is just becoming more attractive to different owners, and they are showing up with the goods to make sure that they have a decent venue and a fabulous following.
Eric, obviously in monumental news, as we've seen Leo Messi coming over to Inter Miami and really what that means for the league.
What was my reaction? Funny enough, I wasn't that surprised because there had been rumors for the last couple of years that Inter Miami, David Beckham, and the Moss brothers were going to try and lure him to the league. He already owns a number of properties in Miami. I had read reports that his wife was very keen on moving to Miami. So I thought it was something that was bound to happen at some point. I think if there was any surprise, it's that it happened as soon as it did, because this is a guy who is still arguably the greatest player to kick a ball in the world, despite being 35 years old. He's 6 months removed from winning a World Cup, which has, well, let's be honest, he was already immortalized, but, it has immortalized him. He is among the pantheon of footballing gods. And for him to come at this point in his career, when he is still the very best at his job, that was surprising. What does it do to Major League Soccer? Well, this is a seminal moment or a watershed moment, whatever, adjective you want to use there, because the league is getting one of the greatest, if not the greatest ever player to join when he's still playing at his very best. It's going to attract a lot of eyeballs. People are going to be very interested in seeing what he does here, how he's able to compete, whether it's just going to be a walk in the park for him. You already saw what it did to Inter Miami's social media number. I think it's also going to attract more players. Look, the league has gone from strength to strength. There's a tremendous amount of talent here. He's not the first World Cup winner from that Argentine team to play in MLS, because you had Thiago Almada at Atlanta United. And I just think that more players of that caliber are going to want to join this league.
Yeah. And the social media part you mentioned is pretty funny too. They went from getting, I think it was like 7,000 likes at most, and then they're getting a couple 100,000 likes on their social media page. And the amount of excitement that it's brought so far is crazy. Passing over deals to stay in Europe that would have maybe given him more money. There was rumors of going back to Barcelona, rumors of following Ronaldo to Saudi Arabia, playing there, which obviously passed up a lot of money going there. But, like you said, they still have to make it official, but he's going to be coming over now. Do you feel like if Argentina did not seal the deal in the World Cup, that he would have had a little bit more hesitancy of making the move, like he did now?
Maybe, but I'm just speculating, right? Nobody really knows. I don't think it's very easy to be Leo Messi. He can't have a normal life, because wherever he goes, he gets hounded by hundreds of people. And I do believe that has a way of wearing thin, and that perhaps he was looking to be in a place where that won't happen as much. Now, I don't know if that's the case, because, anytime he comes to the United States, he's followed around by legions of fans. So that may play a part in it. But that's a very good question. I think the only person who can answer that question is Leo Messi himself.
When you look at the players that have come over in the past, right? David Beckham coming to LA. If you look way back before our time, Pele obviously coming to the New York Cosmos. How does this move, you think, compared to some of those other moves, Personally, I think this one puts it over the top, but I want to get your expert opinion on it.
Look, no disrespect to Pele or David Beckham for that matter, but this is far greater for a number of reasons. And perhaps one of the most important is, we're in a different media age. Pele's cosmos weren't accessible to everybody, but we saw the pull that he had.
Right.
He and players of his ilk, Franz Beckenbauer, George Best, those guys were gracing the pitches. Ultimately, the NASL went bankrupt. And when Major League Soccer came to fruition, I think that was their primary concern, right? That's why, single entity ownership and all that stuff. David Beckham arrives at a crucial juncture as well. He was in his early 30s, I believe, maybe 33, 34. I don't remember off the top of my head. The most marketable athlete in the world at that time. I don't think anybody stood up to him or anybody compared to him. But despite being still a very good player, someone who had just finished his European career at PSG, who played for Real Madrid, who played for Manchester United, who won a treble with Manchester United. When he arrived, he was not at the top of his game, and he was certainly not considered one of the best players in the world, although he went on to become one of the best players in Major League Soccer at the time. With Messi, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, he can compete against anybody and dominate any game against any opponent. We saw it in the World Cup. We see it in league play with PSG. We saw it with Barcelona. So you're just talking about a different caliber of player, and you're talking about a different moment in time, one where access to athletes is far greater than it was before, and in some ways unimaginable to people 20 years ago.
Messi, given everything that he's achieved, you think it's going to be easy for him to just come in here and play his game? Or do you feel like, the fact that he's almost like the equivalent of LeBron James, right, in the NBA, in the soccer world, him coming over here now?
No disrespect to LeBron James, but he's not the equivalent to LeBron James. He's you could make the argument, and in fact, there was someone who wrote an article about this, that Leo Messi is the best athlete of all time, based on his statistics compared to everybody else who plays the game. But that's debatable, right? Yep. The one player you could compare to Messi for a small or rather short time in world football was Cristiano Ronaldo, when those two guys went head to head in La Liga, and I was, anybody who watched all those games was privileged to do so. I remember them fondly. I can't believe we're past them. But beyond that, beyond 3-4 seasons where those guys, 5 seasons where those guys were going toe to toe, nobody compares to Messi and what he is able to do. The man is an extraterrestrial.
Switching gears here now to the U.S. men's national team, obviously coming off a big victory against Canada, obviously in the semifinals round as well of the Nations League. What were your takeaways from watching the U.S. men's national team?
The most dominant team in CONCACAF by miles. They made easy work of Mexico. There's just a lot of talent that the U.S. men's national team can pick from right now that is significantly greater than I think their CONCACAF rivals. And that really is a testament to the amount of work that has been done at the grassroots level in this country when it comes to soccer, the amount of work that MLS and other academies have done to churn out talent. It has become normal to see very talented, skillful, young American players move to big leagues in Europe. And 10, 15 years ago, that was a rarity. There was still a stigma attached to U.S. national team players. That's not the case anymore. Look at Balogun and the fact that he's decided to play. He's pledged his allegiance to to the United States when there was an argument to be made that he would get a call up for the English national team at some point. So that speaks to the pull that the U.S. national team has right now, its growth, and the fact that they're on an upward trajectory.
When you look at the future of U.S. men's national team, obviously Greg Berhalter now back in the picture. What areas are they going to need to grow over the next couple of years, preparing for the World Cup in 2026?
Goal scoring. If you look at all the metrics, and I know that Greg Berhalter has his detractors, his situation off the pitch years ago notwithstanding, when you look at some of the statistics, some of the underlying numbers of this U.S. national team under his management, they've been competitive. The numbers have been great. The only area where they haven't done particularly well against good opposition or higher level opposition is up front and scoring goals. And I think that Balogun joining obviously means that there's another weapon up top. Ricardo Pepi has, I think, gotten much better since he's been playing in the Eredivisie on loan from Augsburg. I'm a big fan of Josh Sargent. So it's about just putting that part together. But I think that going forward, the U.S. is going to be very competitive no matter what competition they play in.
We saw how good Gio Reyna was for this team. There's going to be some work to be done to reconcile, obviously, what happened. But getting Greg back now, from what you've been reading or from conversations you've had since the news that Berhalter's returning, what are your thoughts on the future of Gio Reyna? Obviously he's a talented player, but in terms of figuring this out and making sure he's, got a good head on his shoulders going forward for this team.
You saw just how his creativity, his ability to read the game is arguably above every single one of his teammates. There's no doubting his talent. I don't know the minutia of what happened behind closed doors, and I don't think most people know. We know what's been filtered out in the media. And honestly, I know a lot has been made about this. It was not a pleasant moment in U.S. soccer, but we're talking about professionals, and both Berhalter and Gio Reyna. And at the end of the day, not to sound like a walking cliche, the team is a priority. And I think both these guys, if there is any animosity, which we don't know if there is, things could have been patched up, that it will be, swept aside as both these guys look to take the U.S. men's national team to new heights.
Eric, starting out of college, you were doing a lot of podcasting and writing. You had your own blog, you started on podcast, you started called Big Soccerhead. Could you talk about that and really how you were able to parlay that, whether by chance or by connections that you made into a role with beIN Sports eventually?
I was a public school teacher out of college. As you've already said, you and I are both Jaspers, and I was never particularly good at academics, despite having two brothers who were, superstars. One's a doctor, one's an evolutionary biologist, so that tells you all you need to know. But at Manhattan College, besides playing soccer for the team, I found that I quite enjoyed academics, and I focused mostly on academics. But unlike a lot of my good friends, by the time I got to senior year, I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought about going to law school. I thought about doing this and that, but I never really put any plan into action. And just on a whim, a friend said, "Look, I just interviewed with the New York Teaching Fellows. You should do it." She and I had taught a summer program for underprivileged kids. We loved it. It was a fantastic experience, and I applied. I got in, and I was working on my master's as I was teaching. And believe it or not, I still had some time to spare. And because I watched a lot of soccer, and because there were there was at the time a team in New York that didn't get enough coverage. I thought, you know what, maybe if I start a blog, I'll be able to watch soccer for free and I'll get press credentials. That happened. And then NYCFC had their inaugural campaign in 2015, so I was covering them as well on my blog. Somebody who covered those teams as well suggested I start a podcast. I did, with a couple of guys, Jason Lemire, who is with ESPN, and Paul Farrell, who's with the Daily Mirror now. And it just took off. It was a really good podcast. It was fun. We didn't take it too seriously, but the three of us knew what we were talking about. And just by chance, one of the regular listeners was a senior producer at beIN Sports. And one day he slid into my DMs. I thought it was a joke. I didn't believe it at first, but he convinced me. I went down to Miami. He showed me around the studios and said, "Hey, man, do you want to come down and, learn about TV and production?" And, after having a very serious conversation with my fiance, I took a 50% pay cut, went down to Miami, and the rest is history. I got an opportunity to call a game and never looked back.
Right. So that 2015 season was the inaugural season of NYCFC. What are some of your fondest memories of obviously we had the Red Bulls in New York, but they're really in New Jersey. There's a lot, and getting that other team there was kind of cool because it added to the rivalry. Can you talk about, that first season?
Yeah, there was a lot of excitement in New York City. Getting to Harrison was a pain. You had to get on the path, and the Harrison train station wasn't, equipped, I would say, to deal with the influx of fans for a long time. It's completely different now, that station. So it could be a little bit of a slog getting to the stadium. All of a sudden, you got a team playing in the Bronx. You get on the 4 train. If you're in upstate New York, you get on Metro North, get out at 125th, and then figure out a way to the stadium. So I think the sentiment at the time was you have a city that is full of soccer fans. You've got another team actually in the city that is accessible, and that it would take off right away. That really didn't happen. A lot of people went to games, but they didn't fill up Yankee Stadium the way they thought they were going to. But look at the investment that the ownership made on that team, and the fact that they've already won MLS Cup. They did it before the New York Red Bulls, something that Red Bulls fans probably don't want to be reminded of. But there was a lot of excitement. It's funny because I can't believe that was almost 10 years ago. We're at a different stage in Major League Soccer now. And I think that there is going to be NYCFC 2.0 because of the new stadium that is going to be built in Queens, because that's going to be a soccer-specific stadium. Because, look, the truth has to be said, and one of the reasons I don't think, or one of the reasons I think NYCFC didn't take off the way many expected them to is because they don't play in a soccer-specific stadium. They don't play in a soccer stadium, period. They don't, and they play in different stadiums, whether it's Citi Field or sometimes playing at Red Bull Arena as well. So I think that playing in their own stadium, soccer-specific stadium, is going to be a game changer.
And then speaking of the soccer-specific stadiums, obviously Miami has a soccer-specific stadium. The capacity is 18,000. In terms of Miami, right, how much of a challenge do you think that's going to be with Messi coming? It's really just going to be probably paying more.
I believe that it's been announced by Jorge Mas that I think the capacity is 20,000 for Drive Pink Stadium, and I think they're adding another couple of thousand seats. They're going to close off the corners, from what I read in the Miami Herald. Yeah, you want people to try to get tickets by hook or by crook to these games, and there's going to be a lot of competition to get a seat at Drive Pink Stadium. I don't think it's a bad stadium. Is it as big as they need it to be when Messi arrives? No, but the atmosphere is going to be absolutely unbelievable. And 2-3 years from now, they're going to have an incredible venue down in South Miami. So growing pains. But as far as a temporary stadium, Inter Miami have a pretty decent one.
We're both Jaspers. Your class of 2004 played college soccer at Manhattan in the friendly confines of Gaelic Park. What are some of your memories playing at Gaelic Park, and obviously hearing the one train rattle in the background? Does it feel like it was yesterday?
Yes, it always feels like it was yesterday when you're getting older. And memories, I would say nightmares of playing Gaelic Park, because it was more like a potato patch in those days. Now it's artificial turf and it's great. And, I've been there a few times to play alumni games that I've been invited to. And I'm so envious of the infrastructure that is available for these new Jaspers. But back in my day, the train noise was probably the best thing about Gaelic Park for me. It was just not a great field to play on. And for a player like me, I didn't have a very successful Division I soccer career, both because the coach who brought me in was fired a few months after I arrived, but also because my expectation of what soccer was going to be in the United States was so off the mark. I thought that I was going to arrive from Europe and I was going to run circles around my teammates and opponents. Little did I realize that the game was much more physical here, that my teammates were far more athletic than I was, and they put in the work, and my attitude wasn't the best. I can count on one hand how many captain's practices I went to. I didn't even know what they were. When my teammates said, "Hey, do you want to go to the weight room?" I said, "Why do you want to go to the weight room? Who goes to the weight room to play soccer?" Well, they were right and I was wrong, and our playing time was evidence of that. So, a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that if you ask any of the former Jaspers who have had an opportunity to strut their stuff at the new Gaelic Park, they far prefer what it is now compared to what it was then.
Gaelic Park's been great. I can echo that sentiment. Been there for some games. The creation of GPAC with the new locker rooms has been great for Jordan Scott and the program as well. So, Jordan and the guys have been up to great things, and we're looking forward to seeing them, in action again.
He's done spectacularly well. Just a quick word on that. Just from the moment he got there, reaching out to alumni, making sure that he picked their brains, our brains, making sure that we were welcome. Yep. He just went into that job with the right attitude, and I think that it's really borne fruit.
So growing up in Portugal, right? I'm sure you were introduced to the game at an early age. How easy was it to fall in love with it? And what are some of your earliest memories playing, like in terms of where you played and who you played with?
Well, funny enough, despite growing up in Portugal, I grew up in a family that really wasn't into soccer. My mother played basketball when she was in her athletic days and doesn't really think much of soccer. And my father, who was a German-born American, was far more interested in baseball than he was in soccer. He did pay attention to the German national team, and we did watch the '94 World Cup together. I'll always remember Wijnaldum scoring his free kick against Switzerland as one of those, really unbelievable moments, cherished moments that I shared with my father as we both celebrated. But, he was getting me baseball bats and he was getting me baseball gloves. And I kept asking my dad, I was like, who do you think I'm going to play with here? Like, people don't know what baseball is. So I actually started playing basketball before I played soccer. And I was a late bloomer in soccer in Portugal, where most kids are starting to kick a ball at age 5 or age 6. If their parents are serious about their kids playing, they get them tryouts for clubs when they are 7 or 8. I only started going to tryouts when I was 13 or 14. Done. And again, a reminder that even in Portugal, as good as I thought I was, I didn't put in the hard work. It didn't help that I grew up in a southern Portuguese town that was a tourist haven with a fantastic nightlife and wonderful beaches.
Yeah. So as we wind down here on episode 5, Eric, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. We're gonna do a little rapid fire. Couple of quick questions. I think you can handle it. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Best player right now on the U.S. men's national team?
I would say best player, Gio Reyna. I'm going to add one. Most important player right now, maybe Weston McKennie.
Okay. And best player in soccer right now in the world?
Still probably Leo Messi. The only player I think that gets anywhere near Messi right now, the only players are Neymar and Kylian Mbappe. And curiously, they've played together for the last 2 years, and PSG were still not able to win anything of note other than the French league.
Given that you started creating your own content and then obviously parlaying that into a career in soccer, what advice would you give people and want to find their way, on that path that you ended up taking?
Well, hone your craft, number one. If you want to be a writer, make sure you're a damn good writer, and try to be somewhat original in the way that you write. To make it more entertaining. We know that people have short attention spans, growing shorter every day because of social media. But also know the thing that you're covering better than anybody else. When I was embarking on this soccer road, embarking on this soccer adventure, I think is the better term there. I truly believe that there were very few people in this country who knew as much about soccer as I did. Whether it was La Liga, whether it was the Premier League, whether it was the Portuguese league. Funny enough, when I started, the league I knew the least about out of all the big leagues was Major League Soccer. We're talking years ago now. So when I started writing, about NYCFC and the New York Red Bulls, I had to learn quickly, and the learning curve in this league can be steep because of all the sort of nebulous mechanisms that allow it to work. And so, I'm not just saying, look, I felt like I was, nobody knew more than me about soccer. I put in the work, man. I watched easily 5-6 hours a day of soccer from different leagues. I was reading every article, so watching interviews, and you have to immerse yourself, and that is a painstaking job, and I wasn't getting paid. I wasn't getting paid to do it. So you have to love what you're doing in order to put in that amount of work. And you really have to back yourself, man. You have to believe in yourself.
The tiered structure, obviously, relegation and promotion model that is a fixture in Europe and other leagues. In terms of that model, I know you could probably write a whole book on this and how it may fit or may not fit in Major League Soccer, and then obviously, the way down in USL, USL2. How far do you think we are from such a thing, or do you not see it as being something that's feasible?
Well, I don't know whether saying that it's not feasible or implausible is the right thing to say, because over time I think a structure will be there, but I just don't believe that's in the cards, and that's okay. Different countries have different league structures, and it's important to point out that when you talk about, take the top 5 leagues in Europe, take the Premier League, take La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, what am I missing? And Liga. Those divisions have been fleshed out over decades, over 100 years in some cases, and so you're not going to be able to replicate that in Major League Soccer. It's impossible. Do we really want to wait another 50 or 60 years to create a soccer pyramid that is competitive? No, look, that's just a long way away. So people just have to come to terms that this is a closed system, and it's likely to remain that way, and it has its benefits. And one of the benefits is that when you have owners who are willing to invest a tremendous amount of capital in these franchises,
Yep.
they're more likely to do so if they know that they're not going to, be relegated, and that their investment isn't going to cost them far more than they anticipated.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate you coming on. That's a wrap for episode 5 of For the Love of the Game interview series. It was great talking to you about U.S. soccer, soccer in general, the coming of Messi here. So we're definitely excited for the future of soccer as we build up to the World Cup. So thanks for coming on and sharing your insights.
Absolutely. My pleasure, man.